record is called Counterpart, after the title of the first track. That title came from just the idea that I had at the time of it being sort of a counterpart to the first record that I made. My first record was called Time with People. It was just an acoustic trio record with piano, bass, and drums. Not really any overdubbing, actually no overdubbing. Really minimal editing, so it was mostly just based on the vibe that we had together in the room. And I think it worked out really well, but this new one is quite different. There's a lot of overdubbing on almost every take, every track. There are parts that are being played simultaneously on different instruments and different effects that are being overlaid, and it's just quite a different vibe. I played a lot of Wurlitzer piano on the record, which I just did because I got one, I acquired one, and I started playing it a lot, and I fell in love with the sound. It's sort of the voice. It's my voice, I think. Besides the acoustic piano, I love playing the Wurlitzer so much. It really cuts, and it really has a beautiful tone. Chords sound great on it. So, it being an electric instrument, it started to feel natural to use some other effects that traditionally are used with it, like, delay. So we got this analog tape delay that sounds incredible. And there's a pedal that I use called the freeze pedal that just sort of freezes the sound that you're making in perpetuity until you let it go, which we use a lot on the record, which sounds really cool. And then we use different miking techniques and amps, and that I'm not an expert on, but each track sounds unique and produced in a different way that's suitable to that song. That was a song that I wrote in stages, really. I wrote the first 8 bars. I wrote the main theme of the I guess you'd call it the A section, in around 2005, just as an 8-bar section that I really couldn't find a use for. It was structured almost like a chorale. It had 4 distinct voices, and it didn't really want to go anywhere at that time, so it just kicked around for 8 years, or 7 years. And when it was time to do this record, I found it sitting around and added another section and sort of developed the main section a bit. I think that one came off really well because right after the song starts, there's this whole open section, just me playing, and it's freely improvised, so it's sort of a weird thing to add to a very structured group piece. Right after the beginning, all of a sudden there's this completely free-form thing, and then it goes back into the group thing. So it's that one's an interesting result. That sort of just came about in the studio. Postcards is probably the best example of this kind of writing that I've been talking about, where I wrote a piece that was really a piece. It was almost like it could be played as a piano piece. All the parts are very set in stone and meant to go together, and there's not a lot of improvisation until the improvising part comes in, which is obviously all improvised. But the rest of the song, between that part and the rest of the piece, there's a big contrast because it's very, very regimented. What I'm playing, what the drums are playing, and the bass. It's all extremely written out already. But the free part in the middle, it's just us improvising together, and that was a big relief. It feels like a huge, release of tension, because the piece really builds up to that moment, and then it just sort of lets go, and it's just free form. But before that, it's pretty tense. There's a lot of 5/8 and crazy juxtapositions and stuff. The song was inspired by the lake that my cottage is on, which is up in the Kawarthas, that I've been going to since I was since I was born. It's been there for 200 years. It's a very old place. It's a really beautiful, peaceful place that I love to go to. And the water is the main point of going up there. Sometimes we just say we're going up to the water. Yeah, the water is the only one that was co-written. Actually, I wrote that with my wife, Melissa Stiliano, and it has lyrics, beautiful lyrics that she wrote. I think the melody is sort of the point of that one. But again, that one came about in a way on the piano that could have led to it just being a piano piece with no improvisation at all. The whole thing is worked out on the instrument. That one was, I guess it's the first one on the record that uses overdub Wurlitzer, so the Wurlitzer is sort of functioning as the voice on that one, playing the melody and taking the solo. The three of us, the real me on the piano, and then bass and drums are just accompanying the Wurlitzer voice, which is also on the other side. Map of August is a song that I wrote. It's the one I was mentioning before that started out a long time ago as a piano piece with 3 voices. I had a whole scheme when I wrote that one that the voices, there was 1 in the left hand and 2 in the right hand, and they're never going to be playing the same note at the same time. That was my rule for that piece. So I sort of studiously avoided that happening, and it turned out pretty cool. It's a short, really short fragment sketch kind of thing. When we flushed it in the studio, I wanted John to play on it, so I'm just playing this figure of the entire time, and John Maharaj, the bass player, is playing this beautiful solo over the entire track, basically. And then later on, the same piece comes back as a solo piano piece, and it's very, very minimalist, still atmospheric kind of thing. But it's the same melody and the same harmony. That's another one that I wrote quite a long time ago. It's the opening section, the A section, dates back at least 5 or 6 years, and it's also made up of 3 voices that kind of contrast each other and move in different directions at the same time, almost in a chorale-like way. And again, I wrote the B section right before the record, but the A section dates back a long time. That's one that I wrote the entire thing right before the date, and it's sort of like, I don't know, I was thinking it's kind of like Beethoven meets Neil Young meets Brad Mehldau or something. You know, it's a very strange piece, I think. It's very like heavy dark chords and heavy dark tempo and very, grinding. And then the second section is much more fast and flowing and frenetic kind of, and it ends in a big huge bang, and it's just sort of a piece of extremes, and there's really no improvising on that one, actually. Also no overdubbing. That one we did live. Speaking of my cottage, that's the name of the cottage given to it by my great-grandmother. That's a piece that I wrote a long time ago. Yeah, that's the common thread of this record, I guess. I wrote the sketches for a lot of these songs came to me a long time ago, and then were fleshed out for this date, I guess. That's another one. The way we recorded in the studio was really interesting. We did a lot of takes of the piece as a sort of a jazz-ish tune. It wasn't really working, didn't feel right. And then there was this suggestion to just play an intro and then just play and then a solo intro and then just play the melody as a group thing, not improvise at all. And that's what we ended up doing, and it sounded really good. The Wurlitzer is especially cool sounding on that track. There's a lot of different sources for the same sound. Like there's a mic right up against the speaker on the instrument, and then there are 2 different amps that are being mic'd that sound different from each other, and that was all blended into this really cool effect. The title comes from a Wallace Stevens poem about the end of winter. The first beginning of the first sign of the end of winter. It's this whole conceptual thing that I found compelling. That's another song that's made of these 2 parts that sound very different from each other. The first one is very slow and like a ballad, and again the melody really drives the thing, and it's the phrasing is kind of all fragmented, but it's supposed to sound unified by this melody. Then there's a beautiful bass solo again by John, and that sort of fades out, and then there's this completely different section in 11/16, which sounds kind of aggressive, but really, again, the melody kind of guides it and makes it sound friendly and fun. And then the Wurlitzer arrives, and it's this big, huge moment. That's my favorite track, I think. It's very dramatic, and I think it worked out pretty well. That was really just a sketch that I made one day. Didn't really know what it was, what to do with it. We just played it as it is, and I kept thinking that I was going to start improvising, but I didn't, and then it kept on going on. Minutes and minutes went by. Nothing really happened, except Fabio, the drummer, played this incredible, just rolling kind of extended solo over the part that John and I were playing, and that's it. I mean, there's no piano solo or bass solo. Neither of us goes away from the figure that we're playing, but Fab really opens up, and it's quite a long track, actually, and it just turns into this drum solo, but yeah, I think it works pretty well. I've known John since I was 17. We met at rhythm section camp at the University of Toronto when we were still in high school. I really grew up playing with him. He's the person that I think of when I think of bass player. I think of John and the way he plays. Sort of compare everybody to that. I really love playing with him, obviously, and he added so much to this record by playing an incredible solo on Map of August. It was just all coming from him completely, no real guidance. And it's really the point of that whole track. He's played all this really difficult ensemble stuff just so well and really nailed everything. And very good guy to know. Really great player, really wonderful guy. He learned all that music really fast for that record and really nailed all of it. Really burning musician, and the sound of his drums really added a lot. It was recorded beautifully too, but I mean, the sound of the way he hits the drum really adds a lot to the vibe of the record. So Emilio Reyes LeBlanc produced the record and really helped guide all the music to the point that it got to. He and I met up in Savannah, Georgia, where he lives, earlier in the year, before the record was made, to talk about all the music. And it was the first time I'd had that experience of sitting down with a producer and really plotting out the arc of each track almost, and really writing everything down, like what was going to happen when and how we were going to achieve certain things. And he really made me think about how music gets made and how different moments come into being. You know, moments that I listen to on other people's records and I just hear as serendipitous. You know, you realize when you're planning a record that those things really need to be thought about and executed properly. So, and that's the way his mind works. He's very good at doing those things, and I'm really lucky to have him around. Mr. Mark Kosher, engineer and I want to say co-producer of the record. I mean, it had so much to do with getting the sounds the way they were, which for me is half the point of the record, is the way it sounds. But also really was, you know, very interesting things to offer in terms of the music, and you know, Mark and I go way back to high school too, so it was a good energy to have in the room. Well, I'm going to make another record for the Fresh Sound label that my first record came out on. It's going to be a quintet record with trumpet and tenor saxophone and trio, featuring new original music that I've already started writing. I've got a bunch of the pieces done. It's going to be in the same vein, you know, sound like me, but a little more fleshed out with the different voices on the horns, and that'll be nice.